prayer.
Let us bow a moment for prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we invite you to preside over this meeting. Father, even if we have different opinions, give us unity of spirit. Help us to each listen politely as others share their point of view. Help us to work as a whole rather than as individuals. May each of us on this council hear what our citizens and other council members have to say. Remind us that we are not only leaders, but we are also servants, and that it is our responsibility to serve the common good for all. Remind us that no matter where we live, everyone is our neighbor. Help us to work as a unified team in combining ideas for reaching decisions that is best for all of our citizens. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for listening to us. Please help us to listen to each other. I pray that you will always guide us. Amen.
Amen. I'll call this meeting to order. Thank you for being with us tonight. Let's pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any open forum? I don't think we have open forum tonight. That's a time to speak to items that are not on the agenda. So we'll move on to number 4, and that would be items to be removed from the consent agenda. Council, are there any? If it's okay, I'd like to pull C, consider approval of a model ground lease at A.O. Mangum Regional Airport, just for some clarification. Are there any others? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? And that would be the consent agenda except for item C. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. And Ms. Philpott, you would.
I believe the one outstanding thing that may be unclear to you, in the original, so this is a slight modification of a ground lease that we've used at the airport since about 2015, I believe. The Airport Advisory Board worked with hangar owners and staff and negotiated terms and came up with what you have before you in the red line agreement. The one item for you to consider tonight, in the original lease, it stated that should an appraisal be needed to remove a hangar so that the city would purchase a hangar from a hangar owner, they would use the present, that appraisal would use the present value of a 10-year lease in order to determine that value. The hangar owners and the Airport Advisory Board requested that we move to a 20-year lease assumption versus a 10. Staff had been given some direction to not go back any further than where we were before, to stay with that 10-year lease, and so that is what we are recommending to you tonight. Just wanted you to be aware of that if you do approve it as recommended by staff, you would be approving remaining with the 10-year lease assumption in an appraisal.
Okay, and that was my question. Any other questions of Ms. Philpott?
I just wanted to know how the Airport Advisory Board felt about that, or committee.
They recommended a 20-year lease based on what the hangar owners requested.
And we couldn't get on the same page on that at all?
I don't know if anyone's here that would want to speak. I see Mr. Zimmer. Did you want to speak, or? Could you come to the front? I'm sorry, I put you out.
The only thing I would say on that is that since we're offering 20-year leases, in other words, if a person buys a hangar, they have the option of a 20-year lease. So it's kind of pointless to have the 10-year paragraph in there, because anybody who's buying a hangar would be buying it, getting a new 20-year lease. So it's kind of redundant, or in other words, it doesn't fit in with everything else that's on that contract.
Yeah, and I think where that came from is valuing it based on a 10-year is gonna be a lesser value than valuing it based on a 20-year. So the city would in essence be agreeing to pay more than they're already willing to pay for a hangar in the event that, you know, a hangar were to need to move for
That's
some
true.
reason.
That's true, but they would be paying the same price that if it was sold to an individual, because an individual could buy it today and get a 20-year lease starting today.
Yeah, I understand, but I think from the beginning, we had asked that you don't ask the city to back up and have less than what they had in the original lease, and so I think that's where
correct.
staff came from. But
That's correct.
thank you for your explanation. Anyone else? Any comments, council?
So if they purchase the lease, I'm a little confused about that. If they purchase it, it's 20 years, and then if they renew it, it's 10?
If they purchase it, they work out a price among themselves, and it could be based on the cost of the hangar, it could be based on just market value of the hangar, it can be based on many things, and I think that's the way that Mr. Zimmer, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the way that they've kind of bought and sold in the past, is kind of based on what the market has been out there. For instance, a T hangar has brought typically some certain amount.
Okay, I'm okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Do I have a motion? I would make a motion that we consider approval of a model ground lease at A.O. Mangum Regional Airport as recommended by staff.
Second.
Got a second? Okay. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right. We will move to 6, regular agenda. A public hearing, consider a request for approval of a zone change from R3 two-family to B2 general business for a portion of Lot A1A, of 1A1, City Block 60 and 61, generally located at 2824 Northwest Stallings Drive. This request has been submitted by Genuine BTD Limited, case file ZON 2022-01, and I would open the public hearing.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Elena Helton, City Planner. As stated, this request is a zone change from B2 General Business to from R3 two-family to B2 General Business for approximately 2.4 acres located at 2428 Northwest Stallings Drive. This property is a split zone, meaning the front half of the property is already zoned B2 General Business, and the back half of the property is zoned R3 two-family. This RV sales facility has been operating at this location since 2003. And then in 2014, we actually updated our ordinance to require RV sales facilities to be allowed in B2, but also require a specific use permit. So this property is considered a non-conforming use, meaning it was permitted whenever it was built, but because of the changes that we made to our ordinances, it's no longer in compliance. Also, I tried to show you kind of an outline of the property in red, and that dashed blue line is that approximate boundary of the zoning. And so you see that the majority of the physical improvements are in that B2 area, but the backside has been used more for storage and some access, but hasn't been the primary area that's been used for the business. So the property owner is the applicant, and the reason that this request is coming forward is because they are proposing to make a change to the property. There's an existing metal shed and some other concrete pads in the back that they've been using for storage, for washing some of the RVs as they're coming in to get some work done. And so they're replacing that with a new wash bay. And so that improvement triggers the property to come into compliance because it's an enlargement or change of that non-conforming use. And so this zone change is also accompanied by that specific use permit application that we talked about earlier. So just wanted to give some background information on the property and why you guys are seeing this request in the first place. And so the first step is to change the zoning so that the entire property is zoned commercial. And then the next item will be that specific use permit, which shows more specific the improvements that they're proposing and some of the things that they're going to be bringing into compliance with the property. So the comprehensive plan does identify the majority of the property as commercial and the backside as single family. You'll notice that the commercial zoning really follows that future land use category and identifies that commercial corridor. Staff finds that the request won't have necessarily any impact on the future land use, as this property has kind of always been used as a single development plot for commercial use. And so there's no need to make a change to the future land use plan, and this change shouldn't have any negative impact on that existing single-family category that those other land uses are benefiting from. Also, we'll note that some of the things that they're changing as part of their specific use permit are actually bringing into compliance things like residential screening, and some of those things that speak to some of the land use policies of the comprehensive plan about making commercial development more compatible with existing single-family development and trying to eliminate any kind of adverse impacts from commercial uses. These are some of the site photos that were taken by staff. So in the front, you see the entrance. They've got a lot of their display area right out front along Northwest Stallings. This is just as you're going into the property. So that building you see, that's their front kind of sales area. That's where their customers come in and park, and they've got some offices in there as well. This is the backside of the property. This is their maintenance area. That's where they have the RVs come in and they do repairs, any kind of improvements that they need to make. This image is the north side of the property. So there is an existing chain link property along the north side that separates the property from the residential subdivision to the north. And you'll see in the specific use permit, they're going to be replacing that fence with a 6-foot wooden screening fence. But this is that existing fence that's there today. And then those are some of those existing homes that abut the property on the north side. This is as you're traveling along the north side, but traveling east. So you'll see that the fence kind of transitions into like a natural buffer area. The applicant is proposing to preserve about a 100-foot natural vegetated area to serve as the screening. And then there's some area along the south side too that you'll see. There's that natural buffer. Those are those existing trees that are going to be maintained. This is the southern property line. You see that vegetation continues along the southern boundary. And then this is the rest of the southern boundary. So in the upper left, that's actually a single-family home, but it's zoned commercial. And then on the lower right, that's businesses that are located right across the street. So just to give you an idea of some of the commercial activity in the area. This is the 200-foot notification map. We did send letters out to 14 different property owners located in the 200-foot area. We received a letter back from one property owner located immediately to the north. It's a vacant lot in that residential subdivision. The property owner noted that their main concern was that their property taxes may increase because of the zone change or the development happening on the other side of the property. But they didn't have any concerns about the actual improvements that were going to be made or any of the actual commercial activity, just any kind of impact that might, any kind of impact as far as increasing her actual property value, if that makes sense. But other than that, we didn't receive any kind of negative feedback or letters. It was just general questions about what was being proposed and what the change would mean for the residents. So staff finds that the request does meet the criteria for approval as far as compatibility and compliance with our land development regulations. We are proposing approval. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their February 14th meeting and also recommended approval unanimously. And the applicant is also in attendance if the City Council should have any questions. So with that, I'll conclude our presentation and open it up for questions from the council.
Okay. I guess, does the applicant want to speak? Okay, good. And we'll reserve the right to call you if we have a question for you. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay. All right, council? Any comment? Ms.
No,
Bowman?
I would just,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Mr. Bowman?
Okay. When the property was purchased, was the existing business portion of it, was it purchased at the same time our residential? And it just wasn't B2?
Yes, it was all purchased together. And
But-
so that split
but it was
zoning's been on the
zoned
proper.
different.
Yes, sir. And what you see, this is actually all one lot. The map shows like a small white line indicating that there's like two parcels. That's actually a city block line. So it's one lot separated by two city blocks. So for all intents and purposes, it is one lot, but it's got the split zoning. And so it's always kind of been maintained in that common ownership in that configuration.
Okay, with the one letter that was returned to you, were they bragging that their property value was going up or that property taxes was going?
No, the lady resides in Dallas. She said she was familiar with the property, but as far as, brag, I don't think so. It's a vacant lot, it's undeveloped. I think there's just been some general concerns with property taxes, especially in the Dallas area. So they're experiencing a much more dramatic property tax increase than we are, of course. And so I think when someone gets a notice about something happening in their neighbor's area, there's always a concern, well, how's that gonna change, that bill that I pay every year? So.
Thank you.
And she didn't write that on this letter that we see?
No, we called her
Okay.
just to ask her, hey, what are your general concerns? Are there any questions that we had? And so she verbally communicated to us that that was the concern.
Okay. Any other?
Yes. Could you explain to me how, you said it was in compliance before, but then when we changed the code in 2014 to require a special use permit, that's when it became non-compliant?
Yes, and I know whenever you look on the 2021 aerials, it shows that there's some commercial activity happening on the backside. And so we went back and looked at some historical aerial photography. And at one point in time, all of that commercial activity was on the front piece. And then over time, you saw an asphalt drive that was built, and they started to store some of those RV vehicles on that piece, but there were never any permanent structures built, meaning there were never any building permits or any permanent improvements. And so I think the use just kind of slowly transitioned to that side, but staff just wasn't aware of it at the time. Does that make sense?
Yes, but would you call that use compliant with residential zoning? Because it doesn't sound like it to me.
No, we would not.
Okay, so then I guess my concern here is with what we have is several years of non-compliant use of a piece of property, even though it's one piece of property divided by two. And what's sticking in my head and what I'm recalling is Mr. Sparks coming with a non-compliant, having been using a property in a way that violated our zoning code. And staff recommended denial, P&Z recommended denial. And I'm just wondering where the disconnect is between what happened with Mr. Sparks' case, where we ultimately, upon city council action and his really begging, stretched it out to the 10-year, whatever it was that we ended up doing for him. But we were set to say, no, well, you've been in violation all these years and you just can't do this anymore. So what is the difference?
So I have a couple of different answers for you. So we requested or required that this zone change be accompanied by that specific use permit application, which is the item that you'll hear just after this one. And that includes a site plan that shows the property coming into full compliance with our development standards. And so when this business was first developed, we didn't have our residential screening requirements, meaning that commercial developments weren't required to provide screening when they were built adjacent to single-family developments. We also didn't have the same sort of street tree requirements that we have now. So you'll see in that site plan for the specific use permit, full compliance with our commercial screening standards, full compliance with our street tree requirements. And I think in this scenario, the reason that it is different or may not be different is this area has always kind of been developed as commercial, this commercial corridor. And primarily it's been that front piece that's had the majority of the commercial activity with the structures and the parking and what we can see from the street. The asphalt drive, and I'll show it, go back so you can see it more clearly. The asphalt drive that you see to the right of that blue dash line wasn't developed until, based on what we can see from like 2015, which wouldn't have required a permit and wouldn't have been anything that we would have been able to see from the street. And then they started just storing those recreational vehicles in that area. And so for all intents and purposes, it very well be that we didn't realize that that was happening because, one, we couldn't see it, and two, there weren't any complaints from the residents because I think it's always kind of been used for that. So I think this is a little bit different because the majority of the property has been used for commercial. It's got primary commercial frontage. There's lots of other commercial activities in that area. And it hasn't been creating any additional nuisance like the other property on Railroad Street. So the characteristics of this property and the development in regards to what's around it, I think is a little bit different than what we saw on Railroad Street. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you mentioned are very similar things, like non-compliant use over a long period of time that
Yeah.
city council just wasn't aware of until until something came up. In Mr. Sparks' case, it was a neighbor bringing it to the attention, and in this case, it's needing a new permit, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so I understand, and I think that the point that there is commercial activity surrounding the area, I think that I take that point well, and I understand the significance of it. To me, that's maybe the only thing that makes this different. So I am uncomfortable with it, and I think that point is strong enough, probably, but I just want to note the disparate treatment here.
Mr. Anderson? I'll close the public hearing and ask if there's a motion.
I move to adopt the ordinance outlined in regular agenda item A.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, Mr. Anderson. Okay, any more discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move to B, public hearing, consider a request for approval of a specific permit for recreational vehicle sales for Lot 1A1, City Block 60 and 61, generally located at 2824 Northwest Stallings Drive. This request has been submitted by Genuine BTD Limited, case file SUP 2022-01, and I will open the public hearing.
All right, thank you, Mayor. This is that same property that we just reviewed. Again, it's an existing RV sales facility that's been at this location since 2003. The applicant is proposing to replace an existing metal shed and some small structures with a brand-new wash bay. This is going to be used to house and wash RVs as they're coming in for maintenance. The applicant is also proposing to bring the property into compliance with our development regulations in regards to commercial screening and street trees. On this exhibit, you'll note that along Northwest Stallings Drive, they're showing street trees as required. So these will be new plantings that are done with the improvements for the new wash bay. Also, they'll be required to install a 6-foot wooden fence along the northern boundary. That's that red line that you see. And so they're proposing to replace that chain link fence that we just looked at. And then there's that existing vegetative area is ranges from 30 to 100 feet that they're preserving to provide that natural buffer to satisfy the screening requirements along the east and southern boundary lines. Those are the only improvements that are proposed with this specific use permit. If the applicant wanted to come back and make additional improvements, add on additional buildings, those would have to, again, come through the same process to amend that specific use permit site plan. Again, we notified the same property owners because the boundaries were the same. And again, we received that one letter from the property owner to the north with concerns about her property taxes increasing because of the valuation change due to the development and the improvements. So with that, I'll conclude staff's presentation and open it up for questions.
Okay, and I think now public comment. Is there public comment? Yes. Could you come forward, please? Thank you.
My name is Ann Adams, and I just want to say that some of us are not, this is not my neighborhood or anything, so it's not going to affect me directly. But as a citizen, I really have a problem with a lot of the 6-foot wooden improvements, separating commercial and residential facility land uses, because if you look around town, notoriously, those wooden fences are not maintained, and they block off wildlife, they block off views, they block off airflow. And the tree improvements, who will be responsible for watering those trees so that they grow to be an improvement instead of if they die or they replace, whose responsibility is that? So I guess I have an environmental concern and just kind of an objection to those 6-foot wall improvements. I don't see it as an improvement.
Thank you. Ms.
So it is the responsibility of the commercial property owner to maintain the fence and to maintain the trees. The trees have to be alive and in good condition, and if one of them dies, they have to be replaced. So that is the responsibility of the property owner.
And is this by ordinance? Is
Yes, and the fence is also by ordinance, and the intent is to block light, noise, windblown trash, and so that's why it's a solid opaque structure.
But maybe something we could look at in our planning process.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Council? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. C, consider an ordinance amending Chapter 106 Utilities of the City of Nacogdoches, Texas Code of Ordinances, providing for bill adjustments in certain instances. Finance Director Kerbo.
Mayor, Council, Pam Kerbo, Director of Finance. This ordinance tonight, well, I guess it would help if I switched over. This ordinance tonight is to address staff direction on how to proceed and be authorized to proceed with leak adjustments for water and sewer charges in our utility billing department. This process is going to give us a more structured way of reviewing leaks. It is going to be completely customer initiated, so if you have a leak, currently people just call the water office and say, hey, I've got a problem. We are now going to have a written application that they have to fill out. They're going to have to provide proof of repair of the leak. They have to provide documentation and their signature on this that they did not utilize that water for something else. They didn't fill 2 swimming pools or whatever happens to be on their property. And so it's going to be a lot more formal in nature than what we're used to, but it will give the ability for the department to be able to process these on a more fair basis across the board. There is a 2-month time limit on the leak adjustment timeframe. So if you have a leak and you let it run for 6 months before you get it repaired, we are only going to give you the break on a 2-month time limit there. So there is some onus on the citizen to actually correct the problem. And so there again, there's where the 2-month time limit is. This is going to be any excusable defect in the water system of the customer. This is on their side of the meter. So that would include any rupture or leakage of the water system that could be caused by freezing weather, which we had tons of that last year, which is kind of the impetus for this ordinance. Settlement, corrosion, wear, or accident. This does not apply to defective and out of repair faucets. So there has to be a legitimate problem with the water system that was found and corrected. If the customer can show that they have tried to correct it, and the reason I bring this up is we have a couple of folks that have had issues. We know they have leaks, and they have had multiple plumbers there and cannot determine the cause of the leak, and they've done lots of work. And so there is a process in there that we can extend that 2-month time frame while they are having the plumbers out to actually determine what the problem is. So that does extend it and give them a little bit of extra time in that regard. You are limited to 2 adjustments every 12 months, and so this kind of keeps people on maintaining their property. We're not going to, give you an adjustment for 2 months and then you're fine for a month and then 2 more months. And so it is twice a year is all that you're going to be eligible for this adjustment. What is new with this as far as what we're instigating now that was not current policy. Current policy, we have been only waiving sewer charges when they had a water leak. And so what this will do, this will allow us, if there is a significant water leak, and by that, we're going to take the leak period. So let's just, for instance, say that you had an 80,000 gallon water bill. We're gonna take your average, and by the procedures, the average would be the 3 prior months. So if your leak was in March of 2022, we're gonna look at March of 21, March of 20, and March of 19 to determine your average for that time period. If you haven't been in your location for 3 years, then we'll look at the prior 3 months, get an average. So let's just say you used 10,000 gallons on average. Well, then, in this case, you've used 80 at this period, so that 70,000 is your excess usage. So you're not gonna pay sewer on any of that 70,000, the excess usage. But since that 70,000 is more than 4 times your average, we also will offer a water adjustment. Normally, we do not adjust water. So if you have an average of 10, and 1 month you have 20, you're gonna get your sewer adjustment, but you're not gonna get a water adjustment. It has to be 4 times your average. And then the way we're going to proceed with the water adjustment is that excess usage, so in this case, that 70,000 gallons would be billed at half of the Tier 1 rate. So if you recall, our waters are tiered based on a usage. So the more you use, the more expensive it is. So if an 80,000 gallon bill would be you would be paying at every tier. And so in this case, we're gonna say you're gonna pay at Tier 1 at half rate for that excess usage. And so this will allow us to do something for those customers that have significant water leaks. It will not be just, the run-of-the-mill, toilet running type thing. This is gonna be somebody had a line burst and they may have been out of town for 2 weeks and come home and have a pond in the backyard, which happens. So, the final thing here is that the utility official, which will be the manager in the water department, has final determination on this unless it is appealed in writing to the city manager within 3 business days. And so we do have an appeal process built into this, but we're hopeful that the new procedures are going to allow the utility department to offer these adjustments a little more than what we have been able to do in the past. That's our hope, is that we're able to help folks that have significant issues where we haven't been able to do that in the past.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, council, any thoughts or comments? Oh, yes, Ms. Fisher?
Yes. What triggers or how do you guys plan, I guess, to get the word out about this? What triggers the department saying, well, hey, there's this application process and this is how you go about it?
So we will, of course, have it on our webpage. We can do a insert in the water bills. That's something that we can do. But this is a process that is driven by the customer. Mm-hmm. So when you have a leak or you have a high water bill, they normally will call us
and say
anyway. At this point, we will say, this is our process. We have this application that you're gonna have to fill out. We can email that to them. They can do all of that. They will have to come in to do the signatures, and provide that, but, well, I assume that. Are we gonna have to have, do they need to be notarized? Do you know? No? Okay, then we'll be able to do that by email as well. So hopefully it will be kind of seamless as far as, not requiring folks to come in. We've got people that live in Dallas that their child is here. They're gonna wanna be able to handle this, by email, and so we'll make sure that we can accommodate that as well. But this is driven initially from the customer. Now, we do have with our AMR system the ability to determine if there are major leaks on lines, and so if you have a line that is running nonstop for 7 days, which I had recently, there will be a leak notification in the AMR system. Now, the staff usually goes through and tries to find the big items, and then we'll put a door hanger if we have an email, if we have a phone number. But a lot of the issues that we see are small things that are not going to be picked up in those leak adjustment reports. One thing that we are going to push out again, and we do this every year or two, is customers can sign up to monitor their own water meter readings. And they're out there every hour. And so through the city's webpage, you can, you just go out there and you register your water account, and then you get notifications. So like when I was out of town and my sprinkler was on, I got a notification that I set my limits and say if I use more than 1,000 gallons a day, I want a text message. And so I get a text message that says, hey, you've exceeded your daily allowance of water. And I'm like, oh. And so then you can set all that stuff up. And so you can get emails, you can get text messages, and so all of that is out there, and so we just have to kind of every once in a while push that back out for folks to realize if they will sign up for that, it keeps, and you can go out there and look at your water usage at all, any time, and it's hourly reads, so.
Okay. Are there any exceptions to the 2 times a year limit? Built in, written in?
I would assume that would only be through the appeal process to the city manager. As far as this procedure, this is going to be what staff is going to be authorized to do, and the attorney will tell us.
There would not be exceptions built into the process in the ordinance. You, as council members, can always do a one-off.
But it would have to be an item that's brought to council and voted on.
You would have to find a public purpose for why you're doing it and so on.
Okay. And then my last question is, how did we model this policy on somebody else's policy? How did
that?
We pilfered policy language from, I believe, Fort Worth, Dallas, and Houston, and took the best parts of each of those, or at least the parts that seemed the best for us, and put it into a single policy for us that sort of mirrored the general policy that the practice that had been going on before. And so we built on that with these other ordinances. So we're not alone. It's pretty standard to have something like this. And as far as I can tell, it's the best pieces of all of them.
Thank you.
Ms. Harrison, anything? No, sir.
I have one question, because it was a door hanger put on my door at one time. But my question is, how much excess water usage in a residential location that you have to use in order to be notified that, there's an issue somewhere?
Well, I'm not real sure I don't know that it's a quantity more than the number of flags that they see in the system. So, for instance, if you have a running toilet, it's going to be constantly going. It may stop for 2 hours if you jiggle it, and then the next time you flush it, it goes. And so what they are seeing in the system is consistent usage every hour for 24 hours. And then that will throw a flag. And so if they run their report and there are multiple flags for that one address, and they're going to go in and dig and see a little bit deeper and see what could possibly be going on. A lot of the times, if it's a big issue, the manager will go ahead and send a customer service rep out to the location to investigate. We'll put the door hanger, but they'll look and see. And if they can see visible leakage, they will go ahead and turn the water off for the customer then. And then, we don't just let it keep running on their side. If we know that they have an issue, we'll go ahead and address it, and then leave them the door hanger and try to contact them. Of course, when they come home and their water's off, they always will give us that call. But then we can explain why it was off is because they do have an issue, and then we can go back and get it turned on when they get it corrected. So it just kind of depends. It's not necessarily, now, if you wanted to set it for yourself to monitor you set it however you want to. So if, like mine, I have it on 1,000 gallons a day. If I use more than 1,000 gallons a day, I want to be notified, because that's very much out of the norm for me. But individually, you can set that at any level.
Yeah, because I was convinced that I didn't have a water leak, and the error was downtown. But, so the next month, it was the same way, but it did determine that I had an outside water leak instead of inside.
Yeah.
And that's what I had looked for.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the exact amount. I guess I don't know how many red flags I received, but Probably received a few.
And I am speaking from when I was working with those leak adjustment reports. It's been a few years ago, and BD Rambin handles most of those now. So, and we've had some software upgrades in the time being, so there could be some differences in what they actually look for. But that's the core of what they're looking for, is they're looking for the high, because they're going through 16,000 accounts every month. They're looking for the big stuff to notify.
Thank you.
So I wanted to thank you for going to this trouble to have a good policy that we can really, really appreciate it. And I also wanted to say, I love our water department. They are the nicest people. Every time I deal with them, I purposely go in to pay my bill. It's the only one I go in to pay, just because I like them so much. So
Well, thank you.
thought I'd
I
tell
will
you
pass that along to them. That will make them feel
Please
good.
do. I did want to ask, this, how much time, how much cost will this policy, do you have any idea? Will it be automated so that it won't be?
Well, as
What's
far
our
as
burden?
the drafting of the forms, it's going to take a few days, but I think this is going to kind of morph, and we're going to have to figure out what works best for us on the emailing. If we're going to be able to put a fillable PDF on the website where they can pull it out and fill it out there. We're just going to have to kind of work through that, but I don't, as far as cost, there shouldn't be any significant cost in implementing the paperwork portion of it. It will take a little extra staff time to get into the habit of recalculating this, because it's a very extensive recalculation, but once they're trained on it, it will be
I
fine.
was just wondering if there's like a program or something.
No, this will all be, this is all going to be handled, so there won't be any cost to it.
Do you have any guess about how many appeals you think we might get? Or-
We probably, I'll probably maybe just talking straight out of my head here. We don't have a huge problem with leak adjustments. It's when we have them, they're large leak adjustments. So it's the people that are normally getting an $80 water bill, get a $110 water bill, don't call us. It's the ones that have an $80 water bill and get a $1,200 water bill is the ones. And there's probably a lot of folks that technically have a leak. They're just small, they fix it, and they go on about their business. We're gonna see the ones that are larger, and it's not a significant number. Maybe a couple, 2 or 3 a week, maybe. It's not a significant, huge amount of problems out there.
Well, thank you.
Okay. No other questions? Do I have a motion?
So move
Move.
to
C.
accept the policy.
Accept. Second. Second, Mr. Bolden. Any further discussion? Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, we'll move to D. Consider approval of a resolution to pursue claims for monetary damages regarding franchise fees against video service providers as required in the Texas Video Service Providers Act, Texas Utilities Code, Section 66, Texas Government Code 2254-1036. A public notice is attached. City Attorney.
This is to join a lawsuit that's being filed against streaming services. Many of the streaming services come into your homes. They are operating across wires that run through your right-of-ways. You have a right to receive compensation, rent, for the use of the right-of-way. That is set up for these types of providers through both cable, telecommunications, and video providers are all set up to be handled through a state franchise. The large streaming services that we all know and love and many of us know and love and use on a regular basis have failed to appreciate their obligations to pay rent on the right-of-ways. And so lawsuits have been filed across the nation by a variety of firms, and this group of firms is the firms that are working here in Texas. This would allow us to join their lawsuit, which is going on anyway, so that when they get a determination, we're able to obtain the benefit. It is estimated that the franchise fees that the 3 streaming services mentioned in the resolution is around $400,000 for the last 4 years that they've not paid, and it would be about $80,000 a year going forward. This is a significant chunk of revenue that should be paid to the city that isn't. So we should be going after it. So,
Right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, any comments or questions from council? All right, if none, do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Is that moved and seconded? Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move to E, consider a resolution joining the state of Texas and Texas political subdivision settlement with additional defendants, the ENDO/PAR defendants, in the Texas opioid litigation, MDL number 2018-63587. Mr. Kirkland.
the resolution before you, there actually should be two of them. One for the Indo-PAR defendants and one for a group of defendants known as the TEVA defendants, T-E-V-A. Indo was the first one in, and then TEVA was the second one in. This is the third and fourth of these settlements that I've asked you to join into, and give us permission to join on. Indo will result in $9,000 direct to the city, and TEVA will get you $23,000 direct to the city. Joining the settlement also increases the pot of money that goes to the state of Texas for the opioid trust fund, which for Indo is $56 million and for TEVA is $225 million. So this is a significant contribution by these defendants to give us resources to deal with the opioid epidemic. These two are ready to go, and with your approval, we can join those. There is a third one that's much bigger coming through the pipeline, but it's not ready tonight. So,
Is it, can we approve this item as it's written here? You said it doesn't.
there should be two resolutions in your package.
They're in the packet, they're just not on the agenda, right?
The agenda was revised to allow us to approve any resolution I stuck in there, I think.
Okay.
Did we get that approved? Is it specific to the one?
It's Indo-PAR defendants, it doesn't say anything about TEVA,
Well, darn, I'll bring you TEVA next week.
okay?
We look forward to TEVA.
All
Okay.
right, hopefully I'll have the second one by then, and I can really wow
Put
you
those
with big
together.
numbers.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Any public comment on this item?
My name is Chris Englert. I just have a question. How many opioid deaths do we have in this city or in this county? It's just a question. I'm just wondering how relevant our getting the monies is to the number of opioid deaths that we have in this city, or does anybody have that figure? Thank you.
Thank you. Any thoughts?
So, Mayor, I do not have a number of opioid deaths in the city or the actual treatment needs in the city at my fingertips. The formula for allocating the money was based on the number of pills that were prescribed in our jurisdiction, as well as the number of known issues that were generated by those pills. So the treatment, folks in treatment, the number of pills, and the number of responses were all part of the big calculation that the Attorney General's office did to figure out how much of the big pot we get. So I don't know the number, but it was used to figure out the number. And we could probably find the number if you really want to get into it. Opioids is not our main drug problem here. There are other drug abuse issues that are much more significant, so this is really a small piece of our drug and substance abuse problems. But it's something we can get and we can use, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, council, any comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are the funds tied to any restrictions or requirements on how they're spent?
The funds are required to be spent on an issue dealing with opioids. So there has to be a nexus between our use of the funds and the opioid epidemic. So we can use it for treatment, we can use it for interdiction, and anything in between. There's not a grant contract where someone is going to step in and audit how we do this, and there's not a clawback in the contract. So Scouts Honor will work.
Okay,
At least that's what I've been told so far.
okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No, that answers my question.
Do I have a motion on E?
So move.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Bolden? Any further discussion? Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move to F. Discuss, thank you, Mr. Kirkland. Discuss and consider resolutions of support, no opposition, or denial for developers applying for Texas Department of Housing Community Affairs 2022 competitive 9% low-income housing tax credit program, LIHTC, Economic Development Director, Philpott.
Mayor and Council, Larissa Philpott, Economic Development Director. By now, you are familiar with this process. I hope we've been talking about this for several months now, but just for everyone's benefit, it is a 30-year-old program that provides a federal income tax credit in order to reduce the rents in multifamily apartments. As these requests came in, I was asked to serve as the conduit for these requests to you. I just want to make it clear that there's been a lot of discussion in the community if this was something that was recruited by me or the city, and it was not. These developments come to you, as you have seen in our previous discussions, because of Nacogdoches' income levels and the state's qualified allocation plan. Briefly, I'm not going to go all the way over this again because we've been through this before, but those tax credits are allocated based on a state plan that is adopted every year by the governor. There is a point system that creates an opportunity index, which awards developments located in areas without recent tax credit developments and with amenities and generally with a higher income and higher service area. The developers may receive points on their applications based on community support, including local government resolutions, which is why we are here with you tonight. As a reminder, this year, the qualified allocation plan lit up this section of the community, which is that census tract shown on the map there, roughly bounded by Star and University Drive in the North Loop. This is not new to Nacogdoches. We have several tax credit properties. They're shown on the map there, dating back to 1993, and the most recent development was Tower Village in 2013. We do have a mix of what they call family style or general tax credit developments, which are open to anyone that meet the income requirements, as well as senior tax credit developments. We started out with 5 different requests this year from 4 different developers. Throughout the process and throughout community feedback, I believe 3 of those developments have withdrawn their requests, which leaves the 2 that are on your agenda tonight. There has been, in the last few days, these developers have slightly changed their developments. They've reduced the total number of units in some cases, and they both have said that they will now be targeting people who are 62 and above. And I encourage them to explain that further to you. But essentially the difference between these 2 developments tonight is the number of units. The Moroni Park Crossing, which is the first development you will hear from tonight, is Zone PD Plan Development, and Pioneer Crossing for Seniors is Zoned B2 General Business. Just as a quick reminder, here is Moroni Park Crossing, which is the first development you'll hear from. It's generally, if you have been in Nacogdoches for a length of time, you'll know this as the Timber Springs area. It is on the south side of Moroni Drive, and it is zoned PD Plan Development. That's an empty plan development, meaning it was adopted and approved by council many years ago and was never constructed. So the requirements of that plan development go away, and so any other development in that property would have to either request adoption of a new plan development, or they would have to seek a rezoning. And then the other location is Pioneer Crossing for seniors, which is roughly behind Sunridge, and I believe University Hill is the name of that apartment complex on the north side of Moroni Drive. Here's the timeline of what we have been through. We first received word from these developers in November. We went through some small meetings with a few of the council members. We had a public meeting several weeks ago. Tonight, you are hearing their resolutions. The final application for these projects are due to the state, which reviews the applications, by March 1st. Should an application be approved by the state, they would issue those allocations in July at a state board meeting. And then construction would have to be complete by December of 2024. So we discussed these last time, but just keep in mind that housing is a big issue, not in just Nacogdoches. We know it's a big issue everywhere right now. Housing affordability and housing growth is important to Nacogdoches. It's shown in your comprehensive plan, and I know it will be discussed in the future comprehensive plan as well. Some questions to consider. The Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, which is the agency that oversees these, they do recommend that residents of a community that are considering these resolutions ask these questions. And so I encourage you to review those questions and make sure that you have answers to those questions. I believe they have all been answered, but I'd encourage you to ask these questions of the developers as well. So the options you have for action before you tonight, there is an option for a resolution of support, which would award 17 points to the developers. A resolution of no objection, which is essentially a neutral resolution, would award 14 points. A resolution of opposition and taking no action would result in 0 points and are essentially the same thing. Additionally, the developers have requested a fee waiver in the equivalent of $250, and essentially how we would accomplish that is just transfer from some general fund category to the permit revenue category in the city accounting system. Should you decide to do that with any one of your resolutions, that would add 1 point to their application. So just note, a council vote in opposition to these projects means that it won't score as well as other projects. The lack of points means other applications fare better in the competition, essentially. When you make a motion, I would just ask that you please, we don't have to read through the resolution, but keep in mind that we need to know which one of the actions you are making the motion for, and also if you would like to include the $200 fee waiver. And then as a reminder, taking no action, or if a motion fails, that is an option. That means that would be the same as a resolution of opposition. And with that, I'm going to step aside and let each developer speak. I have essentially the same presentation for the next agenda item, so feel free to call me back up if you have questions.
So will we just use the developer for this specific project, hear from them now, and then hear the other one later?
Yes, sir. They are two separate agenda
Good.
items.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Get my little notes out here just so I have them here. All right, I think I have that screen and everybody can see it. My name is Russ Michaels. I'm the Executive Director of Texas Interfaith Housing. And, you know, I'm really excited to be here tonight after what we experienced the other night when we presented to the city. I thought that was a really good reflection of trying to get the word out about attainable housing. And as a nonprofit, it's important to us that we do that in cities and do that in areas all over the state. So, you know, that was a really good goal of ours. One thing I want to spend time on tonight is talking to you about our site plan and how it's changed, okay? So the community gave us a lot of good feedback at that meeting, and we went to work to make sure that we could get the community what it was looking for in this area. So you can see the design here, but I'm going to flip through some of it. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, this is really easy. Okay. So here's the list of the group. We're all from Texas. Again, we're a nonprofit. We actually are the owner and the developer. We use everybody from Texas for our general contractor, engineers, et cetera. Here's a list of what we're looking to do. Mostly single-story cottages with one elevator-loaded two-story building for seniors that creates the community that we're looking for. It's 62 and older, not 55, so we did change that. These are the proposed amenities. Again, these are Class A style apartments that are actually built for a fixed income community, which ranges anywhere from 30, 50, 60% area median income all the way up to market rate. You can kind of see the Class A amenities there. Here's our location. As you can see, we have a large 12-acre lot. There's no trees. We're not really tearing anything down. In fact, we're actually going to be putting in a lot of new landscaping for buffers and also to pleasurably blend into this area. We're going to leave a ton of green space, as you can see, and I want to focus on the site plan here. The site plan is a very big change from what we proposed before. We were up at 80 units. We've dropped it down to 50. And these are 50 units of single-story cottages and one two-story building that's elevator loaded like I expressed, with all of our drainage and detention flowing with the contours of that particular property. You can see that the green space that we're leaving there's a lot of opportunity there. What that means is that there's not going to be anything there, but it's going to be a green space for the seniors. It could turn into hiking, it could turn into dog parks, it could turn into a lot of different things for folks that are living right there. What that also does is it keeps a lot of the seniors, even though it's low impact, from going out on the street and having to walk their dog, where there may not be sidewalks and things like that at this present time. However, we're building so that sidewalks could potentially come later, and we could work with the city on that too down the road. One thing I want to just go through real quick, and I'm just going to read through a few things because there were some updates based on what we put in the agenda packet. I just want to make sure that I get through them. So there is a current market study that we've been doing and that we provided for you all. That was a big thing for the community. They wanted to know, well, what's the demand? Well, the demand is there's about 1,000 seniors or 1,000 senior units that are needed here in Nacogdoches, and that's from professional market study planners that we've engaged. We're only proposing to work on 50 of those units with this particular development. And we're doing that with a planned a PD zoning that we're looking to actually go get rezoned and worked on so that we can actually take you all through the process of P&Z and get more feedback from the community. So in a sense, that's getting us even more time than we had before. So a lot of folks were worried about time. We're trying to get more time so that people can weigh in on this particular development, give us some feedback. So the things that I think are important, and I'm just going to read those, is that, like I said, the benefit of this PD is that it's basically recreated through the P&Z process, and people can see it, they can help us craft it, design it, develop it with community input, unlike already zoned multifamily stuff that might be there already, so we can actually, community members can weigh in and the process is ahead. It also allows for, the single-story cottages because we have so much space. And so that actually is really great for seniors because they like those single-story cottages to build community. They also like the one big building that only has 20 units, elevator loaded in the center, to build community too. Again, this is probably the least invasive to the environment and the topography. We're using a low-density plan with ample detention flowing with the natural contours, like I mentioned. I think personally that it's thoughtfully incorporating a landscaping plan that works by keeping the tree buffer on the east side and then making our entire plan about 2 football fields away from the neighbors to our east, if that makes, if you can see that on the site plan. So there's quite a bit of buffer between us and the neighbors. Again, there's an incredible amount of open green space there, which I think is important. And we also have, like I said, less impact on the foot traffic, and then also the walkability is healthier for our seniors, and I think it actually improves the nature of what we're trying to do. The last thing I want to put up here is, I think on the next slide, and I know I'm trying to be brief here, our senior properties, this is a sample of our services. I don't want to leave without at least mentioning this because I know tax credit developers all put resident services typically to get points into their development, but as a nonprofit, it's absolutely imperative that we take care of the people that are there and that we build community with the folks that we're neighbors to, and with the cities that give us support, the state reps that give us support, that we're here to stay. And so Texas Interfaith Housing, our promise is that we'll be here for the long term. We're not here today, gone tomorrow. We're from Texas. We're going to manage this thing. We're going to develop it and design it with you. We're also going to operate it and bring resident services. And so we're going to be holding this for over 30, 40, 50 years and becoming a part of Nacogdoches. And I think that's important because I want to come back to this city council meeting and come back for another vote on this, you know, for plan development, or for plan development and zoning. And I also want to continue to come back as we become part of the community. And so it's important that I think you understand that as a nonprofit, our heart's in the right place, and we're trying to do the right thing with the city, hearing the things, incorporating them, which is what we're going to try to do when we get into the plan development as well. I don't have too much more on this except to kind of break down the rents here at the end. Here's the unit mix. As you can see, the rents range anywhere from $747 to $897. I think we've talked about this and heard about it. So we're really trying to capture folks that are on median incomes that are 30%, 50%, and 60%. And as the market study shows, there's a high demand for that in this community. Again, that's my information, my contact information. There's some renderings of the single-story cottages, the interiors, as you can see, and then also a small two-story building that we're looking to put in here as well, which is away from the neighbors. And the height actually doesn't exceed any of the neighbors' homes at this point either. So I'll leave it at that. I know your time is valuable. I know ours is valuable. And we would be seeking a resolution of support tonight just for the application. We're not looking for a new zoning vote. We're just looking to move forward at the tax credit stage. So it's a kind request for $250 of a contribution letter and an opportunity to move forward and see how the state program allows us to possibly get tax credits down the road, and then come back and get a rezone for our plan development. So that's my presentation to save you some time, I hope, and I'll love to talk to you about any questions that you might have.
Okay, I think we'll start with public comment.
Okay, great.
I just have 2 points I'd like to address. Again, my name is Chris Englert. Just 2 points. What they're showing us here really looks good. I might even try and get in. However, there are 2 points. The one point is, the last time we talked about this, the developer said that they would do background checks on the people that are there to ensure the safety. I don't know if you're aware of it or not. I'm sure the developers are, that you cannot discriminate against people and their housing based on prison sentences. So I find that just a little disingenuous, but I understand they're trying to push for the positive look on this. The other concern that I have is not so much having the low-income housing, or even where it is, but we are going to pay $450,000 for a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is going to give us an idea of what we need and where we probably need this. How do we know that this is going to dovetail into the comprehensive plan that we're going to get? I think we're just getting the horse before the cart here. I would just respectfully ask that you consider taking no action on this until we get our comprehensive plan and see how this works with it. Then we can know if this is going to work with the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Deanne Knox, and I live on the corner of Ridgebrook and Moroni. So my driveway backs right into Moroni Drive. Moroni, which used to be a neighborhood road, is now a thoroughfare. through, our neighborhood. So my concern is the impact of the traffic. This is on the university side of Moroni, but the traffic would not only come from University to this new development, it would also come from Appleby Sand to this development. My concern is just the danger involved with increased traffic. I live right at the stop sign. There are 2 stop signs on Moroni Drive, but not everybody stops at those stop signs. I am right on the corner, so I do see that people do not stop at those stop signs. There's also a lot of traffic that is racing up and down this road. And so I guess my concern is just overall the danger. There is the noise factor that is a nuisance, but my concern is more of the danger and whether or not we're prepared, whether we know what that would be before we allow these developments to come in. So I think I would ask that you would vote of no approval or no action at this time. Also, I have a question, and it may be a question that is easily answered. When I was listening to the RV business that wanted to zone change, it appears that letters went out and phone calls were made to all of the residents that were around that zone change. So in the words of Councilmember Fisher, what is the difference? Why have we not been afforded that privilege of having letters sent to us to ask us whether or not we would have any concerns about the zone change?
He has not requested the zone change at this point. They're only asking for the letter of resolution.
Okay.
The zone change would come, that's what he was saying, he has more
Okay.
time, because that would come later.
Okay, and then at that point, do we then get the letters?
500 feet, is that correct?
Okay,
Up
Okay.
within the site.
okay, thank you
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Aye.
My name is Colin Ortiz. I live on Carroll Street, and I just have a couple of things you're going to hear from me twice tonight. So, for the last couple of weeks, we've been circulating petitions, and I'm going to just read you the wording that we have on here. Our reasons for opposition. Number one, the city of Nacogdoches, hereafter known as the city, has entered into an agreement with DTJ Designs to develop a comprehensive plan for the city. In the professional design services agreement, DTJ has promised a thorough housing study, including but not limited to conditions of existing housing, permitting, development plans, proposed projects, review of code cases, neighborhood policies, rental concentration, etc. And then I cited the task 1.5. The city is paying $450,000 for the plan. It would be premature to allow a proposed development of this type to move forward without the plan and the study completed. Number two, the city, wards, and neighborhoods would be best served to have input regarding the developer or developers and developments that will have an impact in our area. The interested parties of Nacogdoches need to vet potential developers, learn how past litigations were settled or solved, and determine if there are parties with which the city should or should not conduct business. Number three, the citizens of Nacogdoches deserve a voice in developments in our city and should be afforded ample time to consider all of the factors related to such developments, as well as to lead the exploration and partnerships in housing. The less than 2 months' time since learning about these potential developments is not nearly enough to make informed and satisfactory decisions, neither for city government nor for the citizens. We should be taking the lead in attracting developers and determining what is best for our city. And I'm going to submit, there are dozens of signatures here in opposition to Moroni Park Crossing, and I'm going to give those to you, Jan. Thank you. Now, I know that this is probably the fault of, yes,
Could you repeat how many signatures are on there, did you say, or?
200 plus.
Okay.
We've had a couple of added since I last counted. Now, one thing that's probably the fault of the state is the deadline list. It's, as someone else said, putting the cart before the horse to have this vote and then get the market analysis final from the developers. We can't make really informed decisions until we have a better idea. Now, they're working, honestly, I know, but to make their development fit into the community. But this comprehensive plan is going to encompass the whole city, all of the wards, and there's also going to be a traffic study done. And so all of those things are super important for us to wait on. We're asking for time to see what the plan tells us, and maybe it would answer those questions if we wouldn't be better served as a city with the 4% tax credits that are available for renovating and remodeling and improving on the facilities that already exist. We really need a good idea of what's already out there, what needs to be fixed up, and how that will best serve our community. We are asking the city council for a no action or a no vote. We want a 0 points ending to this tonight until we can get some more information about what we really need. I would note that this is the third meeting I've attended, February's city council meeting, the developers meeting, and then tonight. And unless somebody speaks after me in favor, we have yet to see anyone come forward and say, the city really needs this, the city really want this. I have yet to see anyone from the target population come out and say, but I've seen hundreds of people come out and say, we don't want it. So, again, I would ask for a denial vote tonight. And I also have a question. Do we have any competitors still in the region, or is it just down to these two? Are there any competitors for the region's money in Lufkin? That was,
Phil, do you know the answer to that?
I don't know if they've pulled their applications. I can tell you there was at least one other application in the pre-application cycle that would be in Lufkin.
Yep.
But I don't know if that's still an active application.
And that was the only other one in the region?
Yes.
I know that there were 4 at one time. We were able to download that from the TDHCA website. But I have also looked at the minutes, or actually the agenda from Lufkin for the last 2 months, January, February, and I've yet to see anything about those on a city council. And considering that the 1st is the deadline for the state, I'm beginning to wonder if it's not just down to these 2. Just wondering. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So my name is Sherilyn Stratton, and I wrote a letter to Sherilyn, like Carolyn, but it's Sherilyn Stratton. And I wrote a letter to the council. I got some responses from the council, and I know that data can say a lot of things. People can read data in a lot of different ways. And when I constructed my letter, I looked at the census and what our census is saying about Nacogdoches as a whole. And as a whole, what it is saying is our 62 and over population isn't our target population. It's not our target population for the highest poverty rate that we have in the city of Nacogdoches. What it's also saying is that we are not at a cost burden of 30%. We're at a cost burden of 24% in our city. The state recognizes 30% as a cost burden, not 24%. I'm not saying that there aren't people that are in poverty, that need housing. I don't think anybody here is really saying that. But I think what everybody is really saying is, look at the elements of Nacogdoches and where we are as a city and where do we want to move to as a city. The whole idea of points and incentives and developers getting money and investors getting money, it's not for us. It's for those people that are going to come in and build this building here. The other contention that I have is that we were told that they wouldn't get funded if it doesn't go on Moroni. Well, it says a 5-mile radius of all of these opportunity marks that are supposed by the state. And I look at it that if you're really building a community for seniors, you've got a new senior citizen center going up on Austin Street. You're stripping their core from the senior village that they have that senior facility right next to them. Why are we not looking to encompass where you're going to be moving their meeting place to encompass a housing unit, much like Senior Village, that would put them there? It's still within that 5-mile radius of what the state is requiring for schools, hospitals, gathering places, grocery stores, and the essentials that they need. So what I'm really asking is that the council on either proposal vote no. Because we need to really analyze, is this the best place? Is this the best development? And the other thing you have to remember, it's not Nacogdoches specific. Anybody can come to this facility. And I know I was reading somewhere where it said it has to be within the proximity of 16,800 jobs, and then it goes down and goes down. I don't know that we have that economic growth to say we have 16,800 jobs available for people that come in. We have jobs, but we don't have necessarily employment slots for a lot of people that are going to come in, or people that need a job. So I'm really asking that you vote no on this whole proposal.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Charmaine Dickout, and I live on Moroni Drive. And I'm at the intersection that my other neighbor is, that talking about the traffic and how bad it is. Well, I would first like to thank all of you, because y'all have listened to us. I've called each one of y'all. You've called me back, and I really appreciate your input into you helping us get to where we're trying to get. But I'm opposed to Moroni Park for the reasons, do we, just like she just said, do we really need it? I mean, I think that we just need to wait and get all the proposals from the city, from the planning that y'all are going, that we paid for, and see if maybe there's some maybe regular developers that might want to come in and develop that land, that we could bring in some housing for some middle-class people, or, some, I don't know. And then we need to have sidewalks. There needs to be a sidewalk on University, because if people are on Moroni, or their outlet's gonna come on Moroni, they're gonna have to go to the drugs, if they're gonna have to walk, they're gonna have to walk in the street. And we've already had several deaths of people that have walked in the street and gotten hit by cars. And we also need to have a traffic study, because like some of my other neighbors have said, the traffic has doubled. I mean, I live right there on the corner, and so where the four-way stop sign is, and they run that stop sign all the time, and there's just more and more traffic going down there. And we have a lot of people, that area, people come and walk. Not only do people come from different areas to walk that area because it's such a nice and safe neighborhood, we also have the track team from SFA that comes and runs up and down Moroni. We have Nacogdoches High School that runs up and down. And I just think a traffic study would help in us making our decision. And then, again, what's the rush? Why can't we just take our time, get all the information that we can get to be able to make a good, decisive decision for our city, for our neighborhoods, for everybody in here? I mean, it seems like this is just being crammed down our throats. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I want to vote, y'all to vote no, please.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Close the public comment and move to council. Anyone? See some
Can we do
notes?
questions before comments? 'Cause I
Sure.
have some
Yeah,
questions.
you bet. For the developer or for?
I'm not sure
Okay.
if it's for the developer or for
I've got notes.
Larissa.
I got notes from what
Okay,
was just
well,
said, so I
y'all can switch and tap in.
yeah, sure.
And these are questions that I've heard from some emails that I've gotten that I wanted some clarification on. First of all, just basic construction cost question.
Yeah.
Are the developments built at a lower budget
No.
than other, okay.
No, not at all. In fact, the tax credit equity helps us actually build to the Class A style that you might find with a market rate developer.
Okay,
Yeah, these amenities are stainless steel, all that stuff too, so it's.
okay. And there was talk of 17 points versus 14 versus 0. How many total points, not from the city, but just
Sure.
in general, does, is involved in the
This
application process?
17 points is a small portion of about 171 points
Okay.
that we'll have. And so, but if you can't get all those points, you're not competitive with, Lufkin, you're not competitive with the other people in the region, and so that's just how it works.
Okay,
But along those lines, if you are the only two left in the region, will one of you
How
get
it
approved?
works, how it works is that they never award the same deal in the same year in the same census tract. We're both in the same census tract, so the deal that actually has the higher score will go forward. But that's just at the state level. If I were to go forward, I'd still have to come back here and talk to you about the plan development and get that approved, which I'd have to have ready to go by September, or I get shut down by the state if I don't have the proper zoning that I tell them I'm gonna have.
could you explain, I mean, very, 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 very basically, how the tax credit works?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an amazing program. It really is. It started in 1986, and really what it comes down to is the IRS gives the state, every state in the country, an amount of credits, okay, that they use that's for their population. And those credits are to be used for building housing, okay, LIHTX, low-income housing, tax credit housing. And so if you go win 1 million credits, right, what you can do with that 1 million credits is go and basically take it to a bank who becomes your partner. And my colleague can talk about this because he's an accountant way better than I can. But basically, you sell those credits for about 90 cents to the dollar so that corporations on Wall Street and around the country can actually put those into, jobs and investment accounts and do work with the economy, get tax break or get their tax break, apply them to their taxes, right? And then we get the $900,000 out of the million to go take equity and put it into a development so that we can put people to work, we can put people in homes, and we can actually impact from Wall Street to Main Street. It's been one of the most successful, if not the most successful housing program in the history of the United States. It's bipartisan, it's been voted on over and over and over again by both parties, and it always gets unanimous support. It's a fantastic program, and as a nonprofit, I can't tell you how much it impacts people. It's amazing.
And that's what that was my follow-up question. You guys as a nonprofit, then you sell the tax credits, and then you take the money that you get from that and reinvest it into more housing?
Essentially, it's used to leverage the housing that we get. So if we have a $14 million building that we're trying to build here, then those credits will translate over 10 years into $10 million that we get. And then we have $4 million we got to go get a loan on. And so we get that loan to come in, and then we pay that loan off with the rents that we make, okay? And that's how it works essentially.
Okay.
And we have to pay the loan off in a certain amount of years. We have to make sure that we don't defer all of our developer fee into the deal. There's all these different nuances and metrics that go into it.
Okay. Something that we've heard from comments tonight and also from some emails that I think all of us have received is a concern about this process being rushed. I understand the deadline of the 1st. I get that. My question is, I mean, I know this is a program that you can apply for tax credits every year, right?
That's correct.
So what are the variables that change from year to year that would either be a barrier to you guys coming again next year, or that would make it easier or just as easy for you guys to come, say, next year?
Yeah, hopefully not COVID, so I hope that's
Yeah.
over. But what I would say is that if these don't get support this year, you're gonna probably have the same thing happening next year, possibly, because that census tract will be underserved. It will still score as high, And typically, the governor, the trend is that they try to keep a lot of these scoring metrics the same from year to year, and a lot of these job metrics, these opportunity index metrics, they stay very much the same. So the census tract itself will still be underserved, and it could score just as high next year. So I think the time to do this, or at least to go forward with it and see what happens, is this year. That way, you don't keep having this come up every year.
Except for that, I mean,
I don't know if I answered your
you
exact question.
absolutely did,
Okay.
but where my brain is with that response is that it doesn't seem like there are significant barriers in place to prevent you guys, I'm talking about you guys particularly, from coming back to Nacogdoches in a year, and this is just hypothetical, but this is where my brain is. Once a comprehensive plan is done, and to allow more time for legwork, there's no significant barrier to prevent you guys specifically from coming back to these city council chambers and saying, "Here we are again."
There's actually there's more to it than that. The scoring that actually stays static. There's so many other moving parts in the 200-page QAP that any little change can shift. In fact, just to be clear, I've never come back to the same site in a city after a year. I'm letting you know that typically we try to keep the score right, but we typically don't see trends like that or changes or shifts like that. So especially in the rural areas, in the bigger cities, you might find that, but typically the metrics change so much. We might be sitting on $250 worth of construction costs in a year and a half or 2 years, which impact the complete pro forma analysis of a deal and Nacogdoches. So those are things that we can't predict either. So
Okay.
Yep.
So then in your assessment, general assessment of likely versus unlikely.
Totally unlikely that
Okay.
we'll come back. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And this, just let me know if this is not a question for you and if it's for Larissa instead, but who owns the property now?
Oh, the owner right now?
Yeah,
I'd have to check.
Is it, okay, it's not you guys.
It's not us. We have it under contract for about 12 to 14 months. We take it through this long program. And then the owner is actually the partnership, which we're the general partner of, Texas Interfaith Housing Corporation.
Okay, okay. This one then, I think this one, oh no, let me have a couple more for you. Explain to me, 100% of your units are for low-income people, or explain to me the 30, 40, 60, 50 thing that you were talking about?
Yeah, typically, and I'd have to go back and look at the unit mix, but typically what happens in the scoring program is you get a certain amount of points for having 50% and 60% area median income, which is really the bulk of your unit mix, right? And then that's what the program is designed for. You try to capture about 10% of 30% area median income folks, and then oftentimes you try to capture some market rate units on that too, which means that there's no income restriction. So that's typically what the unit mix looks like on these types of tax credit developments.
And is that what it will look like for yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Could you explain why you adjusted your number of units?
Yeah. Basically, we took the public input and, we found that if we actually left more green space, that we would be giving the community a little bit more of what it could use, I think, in the future. We also thought that, by bringing down the amount of units, we could bring in a van for seniors and limit the traffic issues and things like that people have talked about, which is what we do. It obviously limits the footprint of the lands of the topography, so we're not doing as much in terms of our own construction and site work. But typically, this just looked really better, and it was actually perfect to get the public comment so that we could go and do that. It really was us figuring out a way to get the community what we heard and what they wanted.
I think my last question for you, and then I have a couple for Larissa, if that's okay. In your line of work, have you guys come across any studies that discuss the effect, if any, of your developments on property values in the surrounding neighborhoods?
In the industry, I'd have to check in with some of the organizations out there. I've seen maybe one from like 10 or 15 years ago that was done by Boston University that proved that values didn't go down or things like that. I can't tell you today that a property like this is going to, make your house go from, $500,000 to $1 million, because I can't do that. But I've never been around. That may not be here.
The concern is, I think, the lower.
Okay. So what I was getting at is that I don't have a crystal ball, but I've never seen the property values go down. But again, I don't have a metric for that, because you can't really gauge that, because the markets where we build, high opportunity areas, everything is moving up. So I can say this about the properties that we do have and that we have built: they've appraised higher, and they continue to appraise higher because the program is so strict with their rules for us to stay in compliance. So if you go with a group that actually long-term holds, they long-term operate, they're here with you, and they manage and they care about the people, because that's really what's driving it, is that you see this property grow and get more appreciation over time. And that's what we've actually experienced. And I can only assume that that helps the community, and that means that if we build a great product that lasts and we're there all the time, we're doing exactly what people might be doing with their homes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Quick question for Larissa. if
You
that's-
want to maybe finish with him?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question for?
I just have one question, and it was comment made about the clientele, and it was stated that it could be clientele from out of town. Is that allowed in this particular division,
Well,
in this area?
We don't, we market to the folks that are in Nacogdoches. We market to the folks that are here, and with the demand that we have, we don't believe that we're gonna have a problem with any of that. So that's where we affirmatively market to. And so in our experience, everybody that lives in these types of communities, everybody, almost all of them are from the community itself. They wanna stay close to families, they wanna stay close to the folks that they live next to, and they're downsizing.
You already commented on the property value. If you don't receive support at this time, would you continue as without the support and build?
We can't.
Can't?
Yeah, we cannot.
Was there any other area within this zone that came up that would give you tax credit in the Nacogdoches area?
Interestingly enough, not really. And if you see the dogtail that comes down on the other side, and you see ours that kind of stretches out into detention, everybody was trying to go down to this one area where you could get all the job points. And so technically where we're getting our job points is down in that kind of southwest corner of our property site, which is the metric that they have. The reason we like this site so much is because prior to it, it was a mixed use 144 unit senior housing development with all kinds of commercial on it, and we thought we could come in and actually blend in with the area and blend in with the community and give the community a little bit more control over what you can build here in a PD process. That's really what our choice was, because we looked at the other ones, we didn't like the topography, we like this site, and I'm personally really high on this site. I think it's great for senior housing.
There, in several of the meetings, there has been questions about traffic. Did you do any research in that particular area as egress in and out and going to the major arteries like University, or maybe going up to the Loop?
Yeah, we've held we had a quick pre-development meeting with planning and zoning, and we talked through that with fire department and folks that were on the call too. But as far as the traffic study, we don't always do one, but we'd be happy to do one for this. The one thing I can say is that when we did do a traffic study and some of the other developments that I did, what we have in our budget oftentimes is earmarked site improvement costs. I've actually spent on one of the last deals I did in Houston, spent over $150,000 putting in about 18 to 20 speed humps all over the community that came out of our money and our budget to actually slow down traffic and work with the community. It's not something that we technically have in here to do, but if that's something that we end up wanting to do that comes back, we'd be more than happy to work with the city on that.
Do you have other locations that has the 62 and older clientele?
At this point, we're building 2 properties down in the Houston area right now, one in the Galleria and then one out in Tomball, and I think they're set up for that. But we don't have anything specifically out here. One development that I actually worked on years ago as a consultant, actually about 3 or 4 years ago, is in White House. It's a senior housing development. I also helped do some of the other stuff that's up in Tyler as well. And we had tried to do something like this up in Noonday, which is just outside of Tyler, not too long ago.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bellinger, question?
I don't have any.
Sorry?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
You've answered mine all along.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
So have you developed next adjacent to a 1 to 4 family neighborhood in a similar setting to what we're talking about?
In terms of this, I wouldn't necessarily say that we've done a low-density build like this in a while. We've been focused mostly on going into the areas that are urban design and going like 4-story over podium, and we did that with community efforts and community sports where we were actually in a neighborhood, and they were only like right across the street from us. But as far as, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, we typically don't do a lot of these types of developments that when you go into an area, you know, you're doing single-story buildings, you know, and things like that that you have so much land. But when you finally do have that much area, it kind of gets us back to what we want to do, you know, which is we actually can make choices. We can make really great decisions, and we can get feedback, and we can implement it a lot better than if you're just on a 2-acre site.
And along those lines of feedback, would it not have made some sense, or could you have started maybe back in June, engaging the neighborhood and the community to get feedback and to work towards maybe where you are tonight?
No, you can't, because the governor actually approves the rules in the first part of December, and that's the short fuse. And so they literally give us from December 7th to January 7th to figure out what the site is, where you're going to go, and then people go and they look at the QAP and look at the rules, and they're like, that's the area for, you know, Region 5.
But you don't anticipate what it's going to be, what the governor's going to come with as far as the rules? I mean, you would have to expect that it would be an area that's not had a development in a while, and
Yep.
it doesn't have one in it currently, a census tract.
Well, the only way you can anticipate that is if the year before is very similar to this year, and I think we already addressed that sometimes it changes. I don't remember, did you guys have this last year at all, or not so much? Didn't have it? Okay. Yeah, so that means that it's hard to anticipate because it wasn't already on our radar. So you're literally waiting for those rent burdens and those site demos to be fully baked in order to make those decisions. You try to, on some of the bigger cities, I'd say, or at least we try to get into some of the areas that we think are going to be the same as last year, and sometimes they hold true. But it's harder in the larger census tracts, I think, in the rural areas. That's just been my experience. So I wouldn't necessarily say you can anticipate it all the way back to June. You might be able to sneak in, you know, in November and hope that the governor doesn't change anything, or hope the TDHCA doesn't change anything. But they're shifting things quite routinely in November and October in their workshops that, you know, I mean, up until I think December 7th, there was a discussion of it not being 2 miles or 4 miles for the jobs, and that would have shifted everything, and they kept it static at 4 miles. So.
I have a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I did ask around about your properties and how you've been to work with, and I think I had heard that you had worked over a longer period of time, possibly with some down in Houston. Is that correct, or am I?
Yeah, Texas Interfaith Housing is one of the largest. It's one of the longest tenured, you know, nonprofits in the state of Texas. We started in 1966. The original interfaith group was literally about 9 people sitting around a church. We were all from different faiths, and we decided that in the 1960s that Houston had a senior housing and a senior poverty problem. And we actually started to do building affordable housing way before the tax credit program came about in 1986. So we were 30 years ahead of the game. We've since we've kept some of our portfolio. We've since gotten into the tax credit program and started to build new properties. But we are a group and an alliance of nonprofits all over the state. We actually have developments in Dallas, San Antonio, Santa Fe, all over the place that, typically tries to bring this type of product with our empowerment services, our life coaching, and our social services into the property.
But it's not, just to clarify.
Yep.
It's my understanding that there have been some developments that you have taken a longer period even just to start talking with neighborhoods or,
There was.
help me out here, 'cause
Yeah, sure. There's been one tax credit development down in Houston that we received support for, and we continued to engage the community all through COVID. The neighbors, literally the neighbors that we were with, we had routine weekly and monthly meetings with them, and we got support from them in the front end all the way through the back end. And that development down there is now actually going all the way, it's 80% through construction. So the communication started quickly, but it expanded out past the development itself.
So I guess what I'm asking is, I'm following up on several questions that other council persons have asked. We really, in my opinion, we need to be in the driver's seat in this, and we need to take a little bit more time. And I am very interested in housing. In fact, I serve on a nonprofit here that relates to housing. And so one of the questions is, haven't you in the past, I mean, you actually started your foundation with the problem, not with the solution, with the challenge of housing, and you looked around, where can we have it, what are the dollars that can be used? And so I believe I had thought that you had spent more time upfront prior to even looking for a letter of support, and just thinking through the kinds of housing you might have in a community and working with people.
There's another tax credit called the 4% tax credit that's not competitive. And those particular tax credits, you don't get as much equity. You have to show up with way more money, to do the deal. We haven't done a 4% bond deal, and that's not something that we've engaged in. We typically do the 9% stuff, which is the shorter timeline. As far as engaging the community, what we try to do with our resident services program, PRS, which I sit on the board for, is we're constantly doing community outreach with Tyler, with Nacogdoches County, with Angelina County, all over East Texas, all over the state. We service about 60,000 residents with resident services as a nonprofit. So that might be how we actually engage the community. We're engaging churches, schools, things like that all the time. It's not necessarily for development, though, or development purposes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think you'd answered this question at maybe the previous meeting. As a nonprofit, do you pay property taxes on these projects at a market rate?
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other?
I'm just going to make
Yes,
one
sir.
comment. You do have properties in Houston that I drove through, one in Heights, and then one in McGregor. It's McGregor Terrace is what it's called. But it wasn't for senior citizen. That is a high-income area in both of those places. Originally, it wasn't. McGregor I lived in that area at one time. It was low income. But now it's much above average income. And I mean, just driving through, there was no issues that I could see.
I agree. Thank you. I agree.
Mayor, slightly off topic, and I apologize to Councilmember Anderson. I was supposed to remind him that if he was choosing to recuse, now was the time for him to do so. I did not do that. I believe he is signing his recusal now. He has not participated in any of the discussions, and he will not. And I believe you should leave the room now.
Thank you. Okay, anything else for Mr. Michael?
I'm sorry, I know that you, Mr. Mayor, asked this question, and Councilmember Bellinger did too, but just to be clear, because I think the confusion was, or maybe the concern was that you guys had engaged other communities on projects like this earlier on, and why not us, I think is the question. Like, why wasn't this community engaged 3 or 4 months before? Because I think that that's contributing to the feeling of a lack of control over basically the future of the way that that their own neighborhood and area is developed. And so why was it, just very, very clearly, why was it that you didn't approach this community before December?
Yeah, we spend about $250,000 or so to chase these deals, and so that's stuff we don't get back, okay? And a lot of that comes into land contracts and trying to get land under contract. If we start trying to predict what the governor's gonna do in November or December, and we get it wrong, that could be a lot of money out of our nonprofit pocket. So we didn't focus on anything other than Nacogdoches. We focused on one site, and we were looking at it, I believe, in the end of November and December, trying to get there. And then when we finally got it under contract, that's when we knew we could actually legally really go out there in good faith and talk about it. And that's how we really roll. I mean, there's just no other way for us to do that unless you can predict, you know, with a crystal ball where these scoring points are gonna go.
Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
I have a question for Larissa.
Okay, we'll call it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
I'm sorry. But on the next one you can.
Yes.
Right? Oh, well.
I think we should.
Okay, all right.
I'd love to hear.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, my question is he knew about it in December? I'm sorry. I'm Charmaine Dickow, and the question is that they knew about it in December, and he was talking about how goes into the community. We found out about it in December, but nobody from his company came to talk to any of our neighbors, especially the ones that the development's gonna butt up against.
Right.
You would think that they would have come. I mean, we didn't hear about it, we didn't get to meet about it until February.
Okay.
So I disagree with what he's saying. They're not working with our community.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question?
I did have a question. Thank you. Okay, so currently, the property in question here is owned by somebody else. But that planned development has expired, right? And so I guess I'm trying to weigh right now the benefit of community control, given that we are being asked for a letter of support versus, well, somebody actually already owns the property now anyway, so what's to stop them if this falls through from saying, all right, well, then I'm just gonna do whatever I want with it, and what I wanna do with it is do something that everybody else is gonna dislike even more.
So trying to think of exactly what you're asking.
Do you want me to try again?
Yes.
Okay, if this falls through and the current property owner decides to develop it, let's say with apartments.
Sure.
What's to stop that? My question is, what steps would that property owner have to go through, if any, to move forward with that development? Because in this case, we have somebody coming and asking questions and providing site plans, et cetera.
Right.
Versus, yeah.
Right. So they would have to go back through the plan development process, and it's been.
I can't listen to Larissa with people talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I wanted to say too, thank you all for the tone tonight. It's very appreciated. We're just trying to get the information out, so I really do appreciate you. I know it's your home, and I know you're passionate about it, but thank you for that. But if you would give us a little bit more time and let us hear what Larissa has to say, or Ms. Philpott.
They would have to go back through the plan development process. I may call on Elena here to explain that to you if you'd like to hear that more in detail, but essentially it's what we call an empty plan development. So they would have to start over at some point of the plan development process, and I'm gonna ask her to describe that to you, how that would work.
So the plan development process is much like a zone change, where they have to go through the public hearing process and request approval by city council. The plan development is different in that they have to have a site plan in association with that request. So the site plan gets approved as part of the zoning, and they're restricted to whatever improvements that they're showing on that site plan. So the property, as it stands today, is not actually entitled for development. Either way, whether this project moves forward or not, any development on the property is going to require a amended, approved development plan or some sort of zone change process before any development can take place, regardless of this process.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, then the property owner couldn't turn around and just say, I'm gonna build whatever I
No.
want on here. It's regardless, it's gonna have to go through city council approval.
Yes, ma'am.
Even if it goes back to R1, it's got to go through P and Z and city approval?
Yes, correct.
Thank you, thank you. That's all I had
Okay.
for the rest of that.
While we're talking about all the zoning, I just want to bring up one small point. And that's that we have seen a number of zoning, zone change requests that have had, in which the developer has worked extensively with the city. And then when it gets towards the end, that's when the notices go up and everything goes out to everybody. I think your comment is really well taken. I know people have watched flags, and I know you have spent quite a bit of time working with the city towards this. I would like us to figure out a way to bring in people who are going to be impacted by zone changes earlier in the game. And because, I mean, as you well know, many people have had serious issues with that. So I think that's part of what we're seeing right now. I just want to make that note.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Philpott or Ms. Helton? Okay, all right. So with that, we'll.
I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Sure, right, thank you.
I really am very concerned that we be in the driver's seat, that we actually think through ourselves what we want based on the comprehensive plan, based on the housing study, based on all the information, and that we do take our time to think through what happens in our communities, particularly in our neighborhoods. And we need to take great care. I also appreciate all of the graciousness and the thoughtfulness, and I know all of the people in this neighborhood have read a great deal on the topic and have come together to discuss what they want for their neighborhoods. So I actually believe we really need, our efforts here need to be city initiated, and based on our comprehensive plan and our housing studies. And I do appreciate your long-term ownership and the excellent reputation you all have had, but that's just something I wanted to say.
Thank you. Mr. Bolden?
No comment.
Okay. Ms. Fisher?
Yep. Somebody, I think it was Mrs. Dickout, somebody, I think, but somebody said that we hadn't heard from one person that was in support of this yet across 3 meetings. Or was it Miss Ortiz? Yeah, okay, I saw her give me a look. Okay, Miss Ortiz said that. And that is correct, except for we did receive one letter, and I wanted to read it just because it provides a different perspective that we've heard. It is from somebody in the Northeast Ward, and it's just something different than the emails that we've received and just different than we've heard tonight. I'll read the relevant points, but I took the opportunity to attend the first public hearing at the rec center in order to listen to the developers and their representatives introduce themselves, provide information to the public about their intended goals. What I experienced was very disturbing. Although there were legitimate concerns about the neighborhoods, there was also hostility and disrespect toward the guest speakers. I also attended the meeting at Liberty Hall hosted by Kathleen Bellinger, and I expressed to the attendees that more housing is needed in Nacogdoches based on my experience as a property manager. I currently manage a senior low-income housing tax credit property in Nacogdoches, and I constantly receive inquiries about needed housing. There are seniors that live in apartment homes where college students reside. They do not yet meet the age requirement of 62 in order to reside at the senior property on Northway and experience backed up waiting lists due to no availability throughout the city. I sometimes receive calls from representatives of nursing home facilities because they have clients that are transitioning from temporary stays there and want to and can live independently. I also receive calls from representatives of Veterans Affairs who have clients in need of housing. So these are the people that we're talking about. These are the people who need housing. And one phrase that keeps coming into my brain is, there but for the grace of God, go I. I understand some of the concerns that I've heard, and I think that they're legitimate, particularly concerns regarding feeling rushed, not feeling properly engaged. I think that the concerns about the comprehensive plan, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I think the concerns about the comprehensive plan, seeing how it plays out, I understand that. I've also gotten some emails that have sounded really unwelcoming and really unneighborly, especially for people in need, and I don't think that that's what we're called to do. I recognize that there are legitimate concerns, but I think that opposition needs to be data-driven. And I've not heard these two things tonight, but I do want to make a comment on them, and I'm glad that I haven't, but I do want to make a comment on them because I've heard them in emails. One, concerns about property values going down. I asked the question, but I also did some research on my own, and it seems like, and this is just for information purposes, the vast majority of studies have found that affordable housing actually does not depress neighborhood property values, and may even raise them in some cases. Overall, the research suggests that neighbors should have little to fear from the type of attractive and modestly sized developments that constitute the bulk of newly produced affordable housing today. Regarding increased crime, and this is something that I heard that Chief Seavey has confirmed is the case locally, but I've heard some troubling remarks that basically equate low-income people to criminals. And first of all, database, it's not. It doesn't even track. It turns out that when you build affordable housing near and around safe, established neighborhoods, near and around community services, medical services, education, grocery stores, that there is no change in crime rate. The things that I've been evaluating this on the merits, and it's a very, very close call for me. The things that have concerned me are the need in the community, the reputation of the developers for building and maintaining quality, safe housing, not just for the surrounding neighborhood, but for the potential residents, that I also think we should be concerned about and talking about. But I'm also concerned about our comprehensive plan, and I think that that's a strong point. Some of us on council advocated strongly for it because we think that it's important to have, we think it's important for Nacogdoches to grow strategically and for our growth to occur in concert with a more broad-based plan, as opposed to piecemeal. And our comprehensive plan, as some people have said, is going to include a housing study. I honestly have no doubt that that housing study across the board is probably going to say that we we need housing across the board, and not just single-family residential. We're gonna need affordable housing too. We're gonna need apartments too. That's I'm not an expert, but I don't think that you need to be an expert or see into a crystal ball to guess that that's what's gonna happen. And so I'm balancing in my brain right now and in my heart the need for this kind of housing now versus a year from now, with our commitment as a city council to grow strategically and according to a plan. With that said, I think that if this doesn't go anywhere tonight, if neither developer gets awarded anything, I think that in the future, I hope that you guys will be ready for these kinds of proposals to be coming forward and that you'll be engaged, right? So that we can hear your input, and so the developers hear your input. I think that that's important. I think that you guys having a say and a voice and control over how your area develops is important. I get that. But for my part, at least, if these developments don't move forward, that doesn't mean that I am not committed to affordable housing in this community, because we need it. And I hope that you guys will be prepared to work with the city and with developers for when that time comes.
Thank you. And I guess
Yeah,
really,
Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to make one comment. With all of the email that we have received, in my opinion, it's just basically we are against subsidized housing. Now, the other issues, I mean, there was comments like due to the traffic and the crime that's going to be bring to that area, we're going to start after hiring more police officers. I just basically felt that in statements like those people, they, I mean, who are they and who are those people? It's basically they just did not want this type of housing in their neighborhood or close to their neighborhood. But there has really have been no information given that the crime is going to rise and there's going to be more traffic-wise. Especially, I became more interested in when he went to 62 and older. We don't bother people that's going to work in the morning, getting off in the evening as senior citizens. Now, we may from between 9 and 1, you may have traffic. And they certainly not going to be walking to the post office and Krogan, et cetera. So a lot of the issues that they sent by email, in my opinion, does not exist now, and I don't think it would exist in the future. But also one of the things is, and I understand the comprehensive plan, and I agree with it, but do we miss the opportunity now to bring not only needed, but available housing to those who actually really need it right now? Because one of the part of that letter that was sent to us, it said, based on my experience, I strongly feel there's a housing shortage in Nacogdoches, and voting yes has a potential to provide our seniors with the needed housing that they need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I know this is out of line, but in follow-up to that, I was looking at can I ask the council to ask a question to the developer?
Can you come forward?
Deanne Knox, I was just looking at the slide that the developer had up, and
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, we recorded.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
as I was looking at the slide, I would like the council, could you possibly ask another question of the developer? On the bottom of his slide, there's a disclaimer that says that any part of that development or that proposal could be changed. So once you give your approval, could it be changed?
I'll let him address that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm an attorney. I do disclaimers all the time. I want what you're looking at to shift and change, and I want to do it with your help through the PD process. That's why it's up there, because I know we have to go through changes in zoning. So the elevations and the renderings, they're there to illustrate what we do and what we can do there. And that's very close to what we're going to end up with, but we get people's input. That's why it's there.
But it would have to be approved by this council.
That's correct.
In a final form that cannot be changed during the planning and zoning process. Is that correct?
That's correct. You're in the driver's seat tonight. You're in the driver's seat in the future. That's right.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I would say I kind of come down to the third question on the questions to consider, and it says how will the development fit in with the existing neighborhood? You know, the zone change I think is a big thing, and I think it'll be a big hurdle in order to clear. And then along with that, you know, again, I don't know if there's a way for us in the future. I mean, I think what you've done with your design has very much made it more acceptable than what it was in the beginning. But I think we've created so much opposition with where we started that I just don't know at this point that we can get there. Again, I just think it's crucial that we engage that neighborhood back months before and show this beautiful design and what we can do and what we can bring and how we can minimize the impact. I just don't think we can get there today. So that's kind of my summation. So any other comments by the council? Okay.
I have a question. If Jay recused himself, since Jay recused himself, how does the vote play out?
Have to be 3-1 to be in favor.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, is there a motion on F?
I believe no action is the equivalent of number of points.
That's no action would be the equivalent of 0 points?
Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
So I assume by your silence, there is no motion. Okay, we will move on to item G, discuss and consider resolutions of support, no opposition or denial for developers applying for Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs 2022 competitive 9% low-income housing tax credit program, LIHTC, Economic Development Director, Philpott. Project name, Pioneer Crossing for Seniors. Project location, Moroni Drive, TDHCA, LIHTC, 9% pre-application number 22188.
The only thing I would add, I don't have anything new to tell you for this presentation other than, I would, at the council's request, work with your city planner to develop a policy to review these. That's something that cities appear to have done across the state in the last few years that would set up a timeline, set up standards for review, set up kind of informational standards so that each one of these developments coming in knows the expectations. You've mentioned several times about wishing that you could have engaged with the developers earlier, so we can set up those timelines. They are still going to be stuck to the deadlines that the state gives them, but hopefully we could encourage more engagement than we've had recently.
I think that's great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Michael Beard, Bedco Consulting. I heard, I'm not even going to bother with the slides. Everyone knows what we're proposing. Everyone has a strong foundation in what the tax credit program is at this point. With my background as a CPA, that's how I got into the program. It is Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code. What I heard was why the lack of engagement? Why did we wait? We need to be able to have time to sit on this. From my perspective, here's how I came into this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Larissa or Mario, I believe I was the first developer to come to y'all. My timeline was tied directly to one data set called the CHAS data set that's released by HUD. That is the data set that determines the first tiebreaker on this analysis. I knew, because I was crunching all the numbers, being a CPA, I knew that the two winners, the two 171s in 5 rural, were Nacogdoches and Lufkin. I did not know that tiebreaker. I knew the area until the data came out, and that data historically is released in July. It didn't get released until October this year, or the very end of September. It was a very late release this year. We have 3 developments in Lufkin. We have a presence there, strong presence there, that I believe a lot of council members have already toured, the 2 that are already physically there, and the 3rd one just got awarded last year, so it's probably gonna start breaking ground in a month or 2. We're working on that. We wanted Nacogdoches to be the winner because we don't have a presence here, and we want a presence here. We didn't want to cannibalize a current portfolio that we already have. Aside from that, people are saying, why not engage the community? Since we were early on in the data crunching, we only were able to go with what we knew. And here's what I knew. The previous comprehensive plan did identify affordable housing as a need. I also knew that y'all were working and negotiating on a new comprehensive plan, but that hasn't been done yet. So I specifically targeted our parcel because outside of a comprehensive plan, I can only go with what the current zoning dictates as to what the city's intent for future development would ideally be. And by right, if this was not an affordable housing development, if we were to just come to y'all with this proposal as a market rate, it's a by right zone. And no community input could have affected our development if we met code requirements. So then this comes down to why I chose it, what I'm coming and asking for y'all. The people that everyone's worried about, my mom. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. She lives in a tax credit apartment. She's lived in it for 10 years. If this program wasn't around, she wouldn't have had a place outside of living with me, which she did in my 20s. But this program allowed me to provide her a safe home. No criminal background, honest working person, just didn't make income enough. And we're doing a single story, 80 unit build. Approximately 15% of the units will be market rate. 7.5% will be targeted towards the 30% income bands. 20% will be towards the 50%, and then the remainder will be the 60%. Almost identical sort of product to the Lufkin Pioneer Crossing that's right down the street. That development's almost 10 years old. If you've seen it, you see how well it's been maintained. I'm not gonna take up any more of y'all's time. I really just want to say why. And once that data set came out, we knew that Nacogdoches was the winner. We entertained a negotiation with the seller, and once we got it under contract, 2 days later we approached the city to start discussions. So from our timeline, once we had enough data, we moved as quick as we could.
So, and this is 62.
I'm glad you brought that up. We've had a lot of feedback as to the people that are going to live here. How can you ensure that it's going to be an elderly development? The only way you can ensure that it's only going to be an elderly development is if you elect the 62 plus target population. Under that election, all of the affordable units, every resident within that unit has to be 62 or older. And if it's the assurance that the city needs to guarantee that this is a senior development, we've already got the green light to make that election. It is going to limit households where maybe a husband's 62 and his partner, his wife is 61. They would not be able to move into this development under that election, or likewise for any other sort of household composition that has that. But if that is what the people need to feel comfortable with what this is going to be, we're willing to do that. And I'm going to yield my time to questions because I know everyone's heard a lot. So.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go with public comment now. Thanks. If you'll hang around, please.
Of course.
My name is Chris Englert. I like the look of this. It's the kind of place I'd like to see in Nacogdoches. He gave a good talk, a heartfelt talk, and I want to tell you that I am not uncompassionate. If anybody knows me, they know who the people that I work with. Low-income people, homeless people, that's where my heart is. I understand that. I understand the need for these things. I want this kind of thing to be in our city, but I want it to be in the right place. Without our comprehensive plan and what it's giving us, I just feel, again, like we're getting the cart before the horse. Again, I would respectfully ask that we take no action on it. I want this to be in our town in the right place. I want us to do what we do right. I don't want us to do it, and 20 years later we say, boy, I wish I could do this again. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Zachary Smith. I know some of you guys. I met Kathleen a couple weeks ago. Mayor Mize and I met a few times. Amelia, we've met a couple years ago. Can't remember what, but I'm familiar with you. The points that I want to bring up are that the two establishments that Mr. Beard is bringing up in Lufkin, the two Pioneer Crossings, are not located near established single-family neighborhoods. They're located in commercial developed areas away from single-family neighborhoods. So comparing them directly in the sense that it's going to be more or less the same thing just doesn't work out. And then the fact that they are already in developed areas as opposed to a newly developed area just doesn't work out. And then I wanted to touch again on the aspect of the integrity of the actual developers, whereas Mr. Beard is the consultant representing Accent Developers, who had a case opened against them back in 2011 for fraud using low-income housing tax credits with stealing architectural plans, forging signatures, and signing fraudulent tax credit applications. And the closing note that I wanted to make was best prediction of future behavior is past behavior. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Milton Mora. Just some late comments, about an hour late, concerning the developments. I'm not opposed. I wasn't opposed to either one of them. And the fact that these gentlemen are proposing known types of development is something that the unknown factor is taken away. Somebody else comes and purchases a property, I think as Ms. Fisher has already noted, can come before us and not have maybe any input. The traffic concern, it's coming. That property is vacant. It's been vacant for years. It's coming. The traffic is coming. Need a traffic light on University Drive, and you can take care of that to a great extent. The comprehensive plan is something that seems like to me as being a little bit over-considered this evening. That property is vacant. It's very valuable. The comprehensive plan is they're going to recommend no telling what there, but it could be all commercial. It could be a mix of all sorts of things there. So the development of the property is coming. You've got knowns here versus unknowns in the future. So and as the lady's letter said, there is a need for low-income housing here. The key word in this whole situation is low income. And if it wasn't for that word being involved in this, we wouldn't even be at this meeting. It would be a private developer doing something, and it would just be there. But the word low income is the key here. Thank you.
Thank you.
For me, it's not the words low. Oh, I'm sorry,
Tell us who
Tracy
you are.
Lassiter. for me, it's not the words low income as much as it is government. I just wanted to highlight that these developments are not being proposed because natural market forces called for it. This isn't the healthy play of supply and demand that is so necessary to a thriving local economy and real estate market. This is occurring because government bureaucrats far away from here have decided what our community must look like. People that have never been here in Nacogdoches have decided what the demographics and income levels of the people in each neighborhood of Nacogdoches should look like. Then a computer program spit out the neighborhood around Moroni and University, so lucky them. So there's a name for this. It's called social engineering. It is bureaucratic control of our local community for their purposes, for the enrichment of out-of-town developers at the expense of nearby property owners. Thank you.
Ann Adams, I just have a question. Does these development proposals, do they fit in with the new master plan?
The master plan will be designed by us, by all of us.
So it hasn't
don't
been
have it
designed
yet.
yet?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hello.
Hello again. So I'm Mary McCleary. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm not going to take up too much time. Y'all just voted $450,000 for a city plan, and of that, a quarter of that money is for public participation. You want to hear what we all say, and I appreciate that. So you're hearing us tonight. You're hearing from so many people all over the community. And I thank you for that. And it's for free this time. You don't have to pay over $100,000 to hear what we have to say. And we're very clear about what we want. Instead of allowing people from the outside who have no skin in the game to tell us what we're to do in our town, why don't we spend some time to bring in developers or talk to people who are local and try to put in more R1 housing in this area. This is a prime area of Nacogdoches and a perfect spot for more development. You talk to every real estate person in town, and we all know we need more R1 residential coverage. The first guy that spoke, I came here tonight pretty negative about all this. I get it. I'm not happy about government anything. I like private enterprise. But the first guy was pretty good, right? And actually his development looked pretty decent. So I was sort of shifting a little bit in how I was thinking about it. But I just took a look at this picture, and this is the most atrocious architecture I think I have ever seen in my life. It is absolutely horrible. Don't put more ugly buildings in Nacogdoches, please. We have enough of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one ahead of you. I'm sorry.
We meet again. I'm Carolyn Davis. Mayor Mize.
Hello.
Council members. I thank you once again for your service to the residents of Nacogdoches. I've called you, this is not my wheelhouse, so I have to read this. I have called the pine trees and rolling hills of Nacogdoches home since 1973. The rolling hills and numerous waterways make Nacogdoches beautiful, but they also present unique drainage and flooding issues for this small East Texas town. I was here when Lanana Creek filled the Coliseum. The engineers had to come back and fix that disaster. We all know what submerged intramural fields look like. I also remember when the houses on Pearl Street behind the First Baptist Church washed off their piers when Bonita Creek flooded after a heavy rain. I remember seeing city employees on University Drive multiple times shoveling all the mud off the street so traffic could continue and move again after the apartments were built on Pruitt Hill. And the same shoveling crews came back when the mud washed down the hill after the construction of the Wood Forest apartments before some of you were born. This happened after the developer had completed the project and the city was left to clean up the mess and find a way to keep the buildings from washing away. More recently, I remember 5 or 6 houses on the east side of Austin Hollow that woke up to mud and water in their houses after a good rain. The builder had sold those houses, so it was left to the owners to clean up the mess. My parents lived there after retirement and spent a small fortune to build a retaining wall to keep the mud out. I say all of this to bring us to Moroni Drive and those hills. We love the hills, but many of us deal with ongoing drainage issues. I live behind the high school, the flat top part of the hill, and we are constantly dealing with drainage problems. We've spent a lot of money to keep water out of our house. So I have questions for each of you. Looking at the proposed location for Pioneer Crossing, where is all of that water going to go? Has the city engineer walked this property? Should we call the Corps of Engineers? SFA stopped the proposed university baseball and softball complex a few years ago when a water runoff was identified as a wetland. There's a runoff creek down the hill on Moroni. Have we determined that there's no wetland that will be disturbed? I have other questions. Who will be responsible for addressing the inevitable drainage complications? The Pioneer Crossing residents will not be owners, so will the developer be responsible? And if so, who will hold this LLC accountable? Will the developer be held liable for maintaining a safe environment for the residents? Will the developer repair damage to buildings or property below or west of the development? I'm not a business owner, but I do understand cost and profit margins, and I have enough common sense to know that if the developer has to spend money addressing all of the drainage and flooding problems, that cuts into his profits, and he will have to make construction cuts. What will be omitted? What corners will be cut? If you notice the asterisk on the Pioneer Crossing presentation under amenities, all those popular amenities are already not promised for all of the houses. So I wonder how many more will be cut in an effort to recoup monies spent addressing the drainage problems. Do we know why local builders have not developed housing or businesses up the hill? Have you considered there might be Pioneer Crossing residents who would need to walk to the store? How long will it be before TxDOT builds sidewalks on University Drive? Will the city build sidewalks on Moroni? We've addressed the traffic a lot tonight. My heart goes out to all of the SFA kids and the high school cross-country kids that run up and down those hills. So before any kind of development goes in, we need to at least address where are they going to run safely. I have other questions and some serious ethical concerns about this particular developer, not this man, but the developer. But I'll stop here. I do not have answers to these questions, but certainly hope you will before you vote to build on these beautiful but often problematic hills. Thank you.
Certainly.
The comment on the asterisks for the amenities, as part of the deed restrictions, once you select a certain number of points for amenities, you have to maintain those points throughout the entire restriction period, which would be 45 years on this property. You can change amenities, but the total points, like for services, the total points have to equate to the minimum number of points that you promised to deliver the residents. So maybe you offer trash pickup for a year or two, and then you feel that the residents aren't really getting a benefit from that, from feedback, and instead they'd rather have a shuttle service. you could swap the points of that one for the other one, and as long as your total points meet what you promised to deliver when you enter into a contract with the state agency, which effectively is what you do, then you're in compliance. And the state agency is going to come out at least every other year to audit your compliance with that deed restriction, which is recorded with the county. It's called a land use restriction agreement. They look at everything that you said that you're going to do, and they audit that you're doing that every time they come out. It's an impartial government entity that's coming out and auditing. Not to mention that, but you also have the investor who's got money in this deal. They're going to require audits from an independent certified public accounting firm. That's how I got into this business. And as to the ESA or the wetlands questions, we're awaiting receipt of our ESA. It's a phase 1 ESA. Once that is received, if there are any determinations or identified, it's all about if there's any recognized environmental conditions, you have to mitigate those to a T before you can even be eligible to receive these funds. And as far as stormwater detention and everything else, just like with any development, this is the very preliminary discussion phase. Should this start to go through the discussions to actually get this thing built, you would have to go through the entire communication process with the city to get permits, which would involve those sort of studies as to how much runoff detention you have to mitigate, what sort of retention ponds are you going to have, are you up to code with the current specifications of the city requirements. We're not there yet. Right now we're an idea. But I promise you, as those discussions, if those discussions were to continue, it would be like any other development. You have to meet. A lot of conversation's been about, are you out of compliance with code? We would have to be in compliance from the very beginning because you would have to have the city sign off on final plans and specs before you can even get a permit. So I promise you, any concerns that people are having, it's development concerns for anything. If you change from raw dirt to something being built, it's going to change the impact of the surroundings. We are setback. We are completely outside the R1 zoning. We are very much closer to the apartments than we would be to the community, to the single family community. And our access point is so close to the Moroni University intersection that I cannot foresee people flying down that section at that exact point. They have to be getting ready to stop at university. You're not going to have people going 45 miles an hour right there. And I guess the last thing I would say is, you know, I've heard a lot about litigation concerns, ethical concerns with the developer. I make no illusions that he had litigations against him. They were early in his career when he had partnered with people that he didn't know as well as his current development team, which has been very successful, I should add. He's gone through the previous participation review process with the state agency where they pull credit, they pull compliance history, they pull everything. He's gone through that same review process with his lenders and his equity providers. And aside from that, Dibble was a city-owned property right next to the golf course. It was actually part of the golf course. They loved his product so much in Lufkin, they sold him that property. And if you think a city isn't going to go through their due diligence before they enter into something like that, I mean, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, you'd have to come up to the front, please.
Do I need to tell you my
Yes,
name
please,
again?
for the recording.
Sherilyn Stratton. So in the original proposal that you gave, you did a 40-60, I think that's where you were at, on the unit composition?
No, it was always 50-50. Our eightplex is 50-50 between 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. That's the design.
But I'm talking about the mixed income levels. You did a 40-60, you were at a 40-60?
I think what you're talking about is the
You come up to the next one, sorry, we wanna make sure everyone at home can hear.
So I think what you're talking about is the minimum set-aside election, which is an election that you actually make on the Form 8609. That's the actual tax credit form that you get to be eligible to claim these. And there's 3 set-asides. 20% of the units have to be at 50% or less, or 40% of the units have to be at 60% or less target incomes, and then there's the average income set aside. So we are doing the 40 at 60, so at least 40% of the units have to be at 60% or less to be eligible for the
So that
credits.
means out of 80 units, 32 would be low income. The rest would be market rate.
We're actually exceeding that. We are doing 85% at 60% or less. We're only doing 15% market rate
Okay.
units.
So not all of it is low income then?
No,
I mean,
and
it's market rate, market value.
there will be 15% of the units at
And
market rate.
how long does that continue? Because I've read a lot of varying things, that it can pull out in 10 years and go.
So the credits are earned over 10 years.
I'm sorry, can you come back to the
Yes.
microphone?
So the credits are earned over 10 years. You have to remain in federal compliance for 15 years, but a point category that we are electing to remain competitive is called the extended use period, where you remain affordable above and beyond that 15-year period. And we're actually electing 45 years. And the only way you get out of that is a very complicated process called a right of first refusal. And it's really hard to do, and basically a nonprofit can come in and swoop it up if they meet a certain qualifier benchmark. Because once the agency has affordable stock, they try and keep affordable stock.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Colin Ortiz, the sequel. So I want to do pretty much the same thing we did before. I'm going to submit these petitions. The wording is very similar and covers all the basic points. And I'm not going to go over the whole details again of our opposition, but to ask again for a denial and give us time, get the comprehensive plan. Again, let's find out if we'd be better served by a different program, a 4% as opposed to a 9%. Instead of adding, why don't we see what is already out there that we can fix up and make better? And I do have a question about the developer. Where'd you go? Have y'all done 4% before, or only the more lucrative 9?
The San Marcos deal was a 4% transaction. The way that those work is because you're getting less equity, so in a 9%, basically 70% of your development is financed with tax credit equity, 30% with debt. With the 4%, it's flipped. 30% tax credit equity, 70% debt. And the only way you can carry that debt load and make it work with the numbers is by getting units. And we're talking lots of units. I think our San Marcos development is close to 300 units. So rural developments by statute are already limited on the number of units they can request up to. And it's rare that a rural development will actually meet the exception to go to enough units to make the numbers work. And that's why the 4% unfortunately doesn't work very well with the rural development.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your questions. Anyone else?
My name's Dave, Dave Cooper. I live in Kimbrook. One lady kind of addressed it, but I do have serious concerns about drainage. I live in Kimbrook, kind of on the top of the hill, and we have drainage and flooding issues up there. I can only imagine what it's going to be down the bottom of the hill. I think there's a reason this hasn't been developed before. It isn't that desirable for developing until you throw this big tax break out there that makes it real lucrative for these developers. Another point I'd like to make, earlier tonight I heard a comment from council that opposition needs to be data driven. That's what we're asking for. We're gonna spend $450,000 for a study to give us data. Let's get the data. Let's make the decisions off of that. I think it's been said before, we're getting the cart before the horse. And I keep hearing that we need housing, we need housing. Give us the data. I've been told there's a lot of empty apartments around town. That's what we're asking for, time to give us the data. And I ask that you all oppose this and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, council, any questions or comments?
I have a question. It's a similar question from the last one, but you're my part B.
Okay.
You're my part A. You mentioned that you guys are under contract with the property owner.
Yeah, so it's effectively a contingent contract where over time, earnest money goes hard, where you start to lose it after certain time periods. And if in the event that, say, tonight doesn't go well, we would release ourselves of that contract and let the land go. But otherwise, we basically had the contract, I think, until the end of August right now with potential negotiation for extensions, but that's kind of where it's at. You would know if you have an award by June, the end of June.
Okay, that was my question. What you plan to do with it if tonight didn't go well for you?
If we do not get a support resolution, I want to make it clear, because of the 2 times per capita, state statute, section 2306, specifically disallows a tax credit development in a municipality census tract that's deemed to have 2 times per capita unless the municipality votes to approve it. And so basically it'd make it an ineligible site.
Okay.
Which I know they really are glad to hear, but that's the
Right.
truth.
Yep.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Do you have something from?
Yes, I did
Ms.
for
Rapont?
Larissa. Yeah. So this one does not require a rezoning?
Correct. Multifamily apartments, as shown by this, are permitted by right in the zoning district.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else? Questions or comments?
Just a comment. It's been said by the
Mr. Beard?
Mr. Beard, that this was an underserved community. And where did you get your data from that it was an underserved city?
So underserved specifically is related to 11.9C5 of the QAP, I believe, which basically says point categories associated with the consistency of tax credit developments within that census tract. So for a rural area, the best you can do is 4 points because there's no rural cities over 100,000 people. So then you default to the 4-point category, which is, are you in a census tract that does not have a tax credit development less than 30 years old? And basically it's a clean census tract because the program's it's 86. So this census tract does not have any other tax credit development, so it maximized those points in that category for underserved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's underserved for these developments, not,
For a tax credit development.
not what we
Right,
normally
yeah.
think of
Correct.
as underserved people.
Anything else, Mr. Bowles?
No.
Ms. Bellinger?
I just have the same issues. I would like us to initiate our own examination of housing. I'd like us to use the data that we get from the comprehensive plan. I'd like us to be thoughtful over a period of time, and I'm reminding that no action is the exact same number of points as opposition. So.
Okay. Any other comment?
I just have 2. I don't need to reiterate everything that I said before. I want to make one comment about this area just being like spit out of a computer or just picked out of nowhere. It's actually based in real numbers and population statistics and analysis of the area. It's not just picked out of thin air. And after we received this letter from the property manager from that low-income housing tax credit development, she did me the favor of calling around other property managers of similar developments, and all of them said the same thing, that there is a need for this. And so, you know, once we go through the comprehensive plan and our housing needs study, like I said, I think it's going to show across the board that we have needs for all sorts of housing, not just the housing that people have mentioned that they want to see more of in town. And that's been supported by people who work with the low-income community, and particularly low-income seniors. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was a comment that Mr. Moore made when he came and spoke about, and it's particularly true with this one because with the first one, the plan development was going to require city council action regardless. But it seems like here, no. The answer is that here, that area, that property owner could decide tomorrow that he's going to develop the area however he sees fit within B2 guidelines. Whereas here, and I'm just making this distinction so people are aware, whereas here, there is some sort of local say and voice and control in what happens. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And I think I'm got a similar opinion here. I think it's important what Larissa, Ms. Philpott spoke to us about before is that in the future we're going to engage these developers early, and we're going to encourage them to engage the public early, and that we will. I'd also like to add to that. Let's ask them to give us their very best deal from the beginning, and let's not negotiate through the process. So, and because of that, I can't support this one tonight. So any other comments? Okay, do I have a motion on G? Hearing no motion, we'll move on to 7, executive session. Executive sessions are for city council to receive information and deliberate on matters specified in subchapter D of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Council may reconvene in open session to vote on the matter. Deliberation regarding economic development negotiating under Government Code Section 551.087.
Can I just say one thing? I know y'all are over with. I want to.
We're going to adjourn the executive session. Okay, now you can talk.
Okay, I just want to say thank you. And I also want to thank Travis Clardy for coming and supporting us, because he told me he was supporting our neighborhood. So thank you. Thank you to everybody.
I want to thank you for the tone tonight. We were very respectful. I was proud of all of us and what we did.
Anyway.
So thank you. We're exiting executive session 8:57 p.m. and back into regular session, and we're adjourned. No action.